The breathtaking hypocrisy of American foreign policy has never been more clearly demonstrated than in the events unfolding at this very moment. President Donald Trump has just posted on his social media platform a warning to Iran not to retaliate for the assassination of their supreme leader, threatening to hit them with a force that has never been seen before if they dare to respond to the attack that killed Ayatollah Khamenei. Let me make sure you understand what is being demanded here. The United States and Israel have launched massive military strikes against Iran, killed the nation's supreme leader in a targeted assassination, bombed cities across Iranian territory, and are now warning Iran not to defend itself. The aggressor is demanding that the victim accept punishment without response. The murderer is threatening the victim's family not to seek justice. This is not diplomacy or deterrence. This is the naked exercise of imperial power by nations that believe their military superiority exempts them from any standard of law, morality, or basic human decency. Hey everyone, I'm Michael Harris, geopolitical and military analyst, and you're watching my channel. What I'm about to share with you exposes the fundamental dishonesty of how this crisis is being presented in Western media, how aggression is reframed as defense and legitimate self-defense is characterized as terrorism. Before we dive into the full implications of Trump's threat and Iran's response, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment with your thoughts as we go through this together, and share this video with everyone who needs to understand what is really happening beneath the propaganda. Now let's examine the reality behind the headlines. Trump's exact words deserve careful examination because they reveal the mentality driving American policy. He wrote that Iran just stated they are going to hit very hard today, harder than they have ever been hit before, and then warned they better not do that because if they do, we will hit them with a force that has never been seen before. Consider the sequence of events that led to this threat. The United States and Israel launched coordinated military strikes against Iran. They targeted the supreme leader's compound and killed Ayatollah Khamenei, the head of state of a sovereign nation. They bombed hundreds of locations across Iranian territory. They killed Iranian military commanders, government officials, and undoubtedly civilians caught in the bombardment. And now, having committed these acts of war, Trump warns Iran not to respond. The logic being applied is that American and Israeli violence is legitimate while Iranian defense is criminal. American bombs can fall on Iranian cities, but Iranian missiles cannot fall on American bases. This is not a principle that any self-respecting nation can accept. The Iranian response to these threats has been measured and grounded in international law, in sharp contrast to the bellicose irrationality emanating from Washington. Iran's representative to the United Nations stated clearly that Israel and the United States have attacked Iran, that they have violated international law and the Charter of the United Nations, and that they must be held accountable. The representative continued that so long as this aggression continues, Iran will continue to exercise its inherent right of self-defense firmly, proportionately, and without hesitation until the aggression ends. Notice the language being used. Iran is not threatening aggressive war. It is not promising to conquer or destroy other nations. It is asserting its inherent right of self-defense under international law, a right that every nation possesses and that the United Nations Charter explicitly recognizes. When Iran responds to attacks on its territory and the assassination of its leader, it is exercising exactly this right. The United States would do the same if any nation attacked American soil. Israel has demonstrated repeatedly that it responds with massive force to any attack on its territory, yet Iran is somehow expected to absorb unlimited punishment without any response. The characterization of potential Iranian response as terrorism reveals the fundamental dishonesty underlying Western discourse about this conflict. When Israel bombs Iranian cities, it is described as a military operation. When Iran responds with missiles targeting Israeli military installations, it is described as a terror attack. When the United States assassinates the head of state of a sovereign nation, it is described as neutralizing a threat. When Iran threatens to respond to this assassination, it is described as terrorist aggression. The same actions are characterized completely differently depending on which nation performs them. This is not analysis. It is propaganda designed to manufacture consent for American aggression while delegitimizing any response from its victims. The domestic security response in the United States illustrates how the consequences of American foreign policy are coming home in ways that affect ordinary American citizens. FBI Director Kash Patel has reportedly instructed counterterrorism and intelligence teams to be on high alert and mobilize all security assets needed. The NYPD is on high alert and will be increasing patrols throughout New York City. The message being conveyed is that Americans may face attacks on their own soil as a result of actions taken by their government in the Middle East. But notice how this threat is being framed. It is presented as Iranian aggression, as terrorism, as unprovoked hostility that proves the evil nature of the Iranian regime. What is not being discussed is that this threat exists precisely because the United States chose to attack Iran, chose to assassinate its leader, chose to bomb its cities. The American people are being told to fear Iranian retaliation without being told honestly that their government initiated the conflict that makes retaliation possible. The concerns about sleeper cells and global terror networks being activated should prompt Americans to ask fundamental questions about the wisdom of their government's policies. If attacking Iran creates the risk of attacks on American soil, if bombing Iranian cities means American communities need increased police patrols, if assassinating Iranian leaders means American faith communities and soft targets become vulnerable, then perhaps the policy itself deserves reconsideration. But this obvious logic is never applied in American political discourse. Instead, the threat that American aggression creates is used to justify further aggression, creating a cycle of violence that serves the interests of military contractors and ideological extremists, while endangering ordinary people on all sides. The Israeli ambassador's statement to the United Nations exemplifies the profound hypocrisy that characterizes the Israeli position in this conflict. The ambassador complained that a rocket targeted the city of Tel Aviv, that civilians were struck, that an innocent woman was killed, and 21 people were injured. This is indeed tragic, and no innocent civilian should die in any conflict. But where was this concern for civilian life when Israeli bombs were falling on Tehran, on Isfahan, on Karaj, on Qom? Where was this concern when the assassination strike on the Supreme Leader's compound killed whoever else happened to be present? Where has this concern been for the past decades as Israeli military operations have killed thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon? The ambassador speaks of civilians being targeted, but Israeli military doctrine explicitly accepts civilian casualties as acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of military objectives. The double standard is so blatant that it requires willful blindness not to see it. The ambassador's description of Iran as a regime that destabilizes wherever it reaches, that spreads violence outward while crushing freedom at home, could be applied with equal accuracy to Israel's own conduct. Which nation has conducted military operations in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran in recent years? Israel. Which nation has maintained a military occupation of Palestinian territory for over half a century? Israel. Which nation has built settlements in occupied territory in violation of international law? Israel. Which nation has killed more civilians in the region over the past decades? The answer is not Iran. The characterization of Iran as the source of regional instability ignores the fundamental reality that Israeli and American policies have destabilized the Middle East far more dramatically than anything Iran has done. The description of Iran as the machinery of radicalism that does not recognize borders is particularly ironic, given that Israel has just demonstrated its own refusal to recognize borders by bombing another sovereign nation and assassinating its head of state. When Iranian proxies conduct operations, it is characterized as terrorism that knows no boundaries. When Israel assassinates leaders in Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, it is characterized as legitimate self-defense. When Iranian missiles cross borders to strike Israeli territory, it is an international outrage. When Israeli missiles cross borders to strike Iranian territory, it is a necessary military operation. The rules are applied selectively based on which nation is acting, not on the nature of the actions themselves. The expert commentary being presented in Western media reveals the assumptions underlying American policy thinking. One analyst described Iran as weakened and desperate, comparing the nation to a caged wild animal with unpredictability. This dehumanizing language is consistent with how American discourse has always characterized its enemies, reducing complex societies and legitimate governments to animals to be contained or eliminated. But consider what this language actually reveals. If Iran is weakened and desperate, it is because of decades of American sanctions designed to strangle the Iranian economy, because of assassinations targeting Iranian scientists and military commanders, because of cyber attacks sabotaging Iranian infrastructure, and now because of a massive military assault that has killed the nation's supreme leader. American policy created the desperation, and now American analysts describe that desperation as evidence of Iranian irrationality that justifies further aggression. The reference to October 7th and Hamas's actions as a small expression of the scale of evil that the Iranian regime represents demonstrates how unrelated events are being connected to manufacture a narrative of existential threat. Hamas is a Palestinian organization with its own history, leadership, and motivations. Its actions on October 7th, whatever one thinks of them, were responses to decades of Israeli occupation, settlement expansion, and military operations in Gaza. To attribute these actions to Iran, to characterize them as expressions of Iranian evil, is to deny Palestinian agency and to construct a threat that justifies unlimited aggression against Iran, regardless of what Iran actually does. The reports cited about Iranian treatment of its citizens, putting people alive in body bags and so forth, demonstrate how atrocity propaganda is being manufactured to justify military action. Such claims, presented without evidence or verification, serve the same function as the weapons of mass destruction claims that preceded the Iraq War. They create an emotional response that bypasses rational analysis of whether military action actually serves American interests or makes Americans safer. The history of such claims should inspire skepticism rather than credulity, but American media consistently amplifies government assertions without the critical examination that responsible journalism requires. The threat to soft targets, faith community centers, and easy targets described by American security analysts represents the reality that American foreign policy creates risks for American citizens that peaceful relations with Iran would not create. If the United States had pursued genuine diplomacy, if it had accepted that Iran has legitimate security interests that must be accommodated rather than crushed, if it had recognized Iranian sovereignty rather than demanding capitulation, there would be no sleeper cell threat to activate. The danger that American communities now face is the direct consequence of policies chosen by American leaders, not the inherent evil of Iran that would threaten America regardless of American actions. The fundamental question that American citizens should be asking is whether the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei and the bombing of Iranian cities makes them safer or more vulnerable. The immediate evidence suggests greater vulnerability. Security forces are on high alert. Patrols are being increased in major cities. Faith communities are being warned of potential targeting. Americans are being told to fear retaliation for actions their government took. If the goal of American foreign policy is to protect American citizens, this policy has manifestly failed by creating threats that did not previously exist at this level. If the goal is something other than American security, perhaps regional hegemony or ideological crusade, then Americans should be told honestly what their government is pursuing and what risks they are being exposed to in service of objectives they may not share. Iran's statement that it will exercise its inherent right of self-defense firmly, proportionately, and without hesitation until the aggression ends represents exactly the response that any nation would give in similar circumstances. If Mexico assassinated the American president and bombed American cities, no one would expect the United States to accept this without response. If China killed the British Prime Minister in a targeted strike, no one would characterize British retaliation as terrorism. Yet Iran is expected to accept the assassination of its supreme leader and the bombing of its cities without any response. And if it does respond, this response is characterized as aggression that justifies further American attacks. The logical structure being applied is that Iran can never legitimately defend itself because any defense will be characterized as aggression requiring American response. The historical context that is absent from American media coverage deserves attention. Iran has been subject to American hostility since the 1979 revolution that ended the American-backed dictatorship of the Shah. The United States supported Iraq during the 8-year war that killed hundreds of thousands of Iranians. The United States has maintained comprehensive sanctions designed to strangle the Iranian economy and impoverish the Iranian people. The United States has conducted cyber attacks against Iranian infrastructure. The United States has assassinated Iranian military commanders and scientists. And now the United States has participated in military strikes that killed the Iranian supreme leader and bombed cities across Iran. Throughout this entire history, Iran has not attacked the United States. Iranian forces have not bombed American cities. Iran has not assassinated American leaders. The pattern of aggression is clear to anyone willing to examine the historical record honestly. The characterization of Iran as the source of global terrorism ignores the actual history of terrorism in the Middle East and who has sponsored it. The United States armed and supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, who later became the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The United States supported Saddam Hussein during the period when he was using chemical weapons against Iranians and Kurds. The United States has supported Saudi Arabia despite its promotion of Wahhabi ideology that has inspired terrorist movements worldwide. The United States has conducted drone strikes across multiple countries that have killed thousands of civilians and created the grievances that fuel anti-American terrorism. To single out Iran as the unique source of terrorism requires ignoring the much larger role that American policy has played in creating the conditions for terrorism to flourish. The threat that Trump has issued, promising force that has never been seen before if Iran responds to the attack on its country, represents nuclear-level rhetoric that should alarm everyone who values global stability. What force has never been seen before? The United States has already used nuclear weapons. It has already conducted carpet bombing that killed hundreds of thousands. It has already used chemical agents like Agent Orange. What level of violence is Trump threatening that exceeds what has already been done? The language suggests willingness to escalate to catastrophic levels rather than accepting any constraint on American action. This is not deterrence. This is the threat of unlimited violence against a nation that has already been attacked and is merely asserting its right to respond. The Iranian people are experiencing today not only the grief of losing their supreme leader, but also the terror of ongoing bombardment and the uncertainty about what comes next. Their cities have been bombed. Their government has been targeted for assassination. Their communications infrastructure has been disrupted. And they are being told by the nation that attacked them that any response will trigger even more devastating violence. The psychological impact of this situation, the combination of grief, fear, and rage, will shape Iranian consciousness for generations. Whatever objectives American planners hope to achieve, they have guaranteed that the Iranian people will associate the United States with the murder of their leader and the destruction of their country for decades to come. The demand that Iran not retaliate while the United States continues its military operations represents a standard that no nation in history has ever accepted. Nations respond to attacks. This is the basic reality of international relations that no amount of American exceptionalism can change. Iran will respond because nations always respond when attacked. The only questions are how, when, and at what scale. American threats may affect the calculations about timing and targeting, but they will not eliminate the response itself. The Iranian government cannot survive politically if it accepts the assassination of its supreme leader without any reaction. The Iranian people would not accept leaders who absorb such an attack passively. Response is inevitable regardless of American threats. The mobilization of American security forces against potential domestic terrorism illustrates how the war that the government has chosen to fight abroad affects life at home. Americans in New York City will see increased police presence, not because of anything happening in their communities, but because of what their government has done in the Middle East. Americans who attend religious services will think about security threats, not because of local conditions, but because of foreign policy decisions made in Washington. The war is coming home in ways that affect daily life, yet Americans are not being given honest information about why these threats exist or whether the policies creating them are wise. The comparison of Iran to a caged wild animal reveals the contempt that American policymakers hold for nations that refuse American domination. Iran is not an animal. It is a nation of 85 million people with a civilization stretching back thousands of years, with universities and hospitals and families who want nothing more than to live their lives in peace. The dehumanization evident in such comparisons has historically preceded the worst atrocities, making it psychologically easier to kill people who have been reduced to animals in the public imagination. Americans should be alarmed when their analysts describe other nations in these terms, because it suggests willingness to commit violence without the moral constraints that apply when the victims are recognized as human beings. The events unfolding today will be studied by historians as a turning point in international relations, a moment when the pretense of international law was definitively abandoned by the nations that had most loudly proclaimed their commitment to it. The United States has participated in the assassination of a head of state and is now threatening unlimited violence against the victim nation if it dares to respond. No future American claim about international law, about the sovereignty of nations, about the prohibition on assassination will be credible after this. The rules that America claimed to uphold have been revealed as constraints that apply only to others, never to America itself. This revelation will shape how every nation calculates its security needs, likely producing proliferation of weapons and capabilities that America has long sought to prevent. I want to hear your thoughts on the situation unfolding right now. Do you believe Iran has the right to respond to the assassination of its leader, or should it accept American demands to absorb this attack without retaliation? Do you think American domestic security is enhanced or endangered by policies that create threats requiring FBI mobilization and increased police patrols? What does it mean for international order when the most powerful nation threatens unlimited violence against any nation that responds to American attack? Drop your comments below. The pattern of American threats followed by American aggression deserves examination because it reveals how the cycle of escalation is constructed and maintained. Before the current attack, Trump threatened Iran repeatedly. Those threats were characterized as deterrence, as efforts to prevent conflict, as tough diplomacy designed to avoid war. Yet the threats did not prevent conflict. They preceded it. The attack came despite or perhaps because of the threats. Now Iran faces a new round of threats, and we are told that these threats will somehow prevent further escalation. But why should anyone believe that threats which failed to prevent the initial attack will succeed in preventing Iranian response? The pattern suggests that American threats are not actually designed to prevent conflict, but to provide political cover for the conflict that follows. The assertion that Iran is uniquely evil, that it represents depravity without limits and unrecognition of human life, requires ignoring the actual record of which nations have caused the most death and destruction in the Middle East over the past decades. The Iran-Iraq War, in which the United States supported Iraq, killed hundreds of thousands. The American invasion of Iraq killed hundreds of thousands more and displaced millions. The Saudi intervention in Yemen, supported by the United States, has created what the United Nations describes as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Israeli military operations have killed thousands of civilians over the years. Where does Iran rank in this accounting of death and destruction? The honest answer is that Iran's actions, whatever one thinks of them, have caused far fewer deaths than the actions of the United States and its allies. The characterization of Iran as uniquely evil requires either ignorance of these facts or deliberate deception. The warning about attacks on faith community centers and soft targets in the United States serves multiple purposes in the propaganda construction supporting American aggression. It creates fear among the American public that makes them more accepting of military action against Iran. It characterizes any Iranian response as terrorism rather than legitimate self-defense. It shifts responsibility for any attacks that occur from the American government that initiated the conflict to Iran that responds to aggression. And it prepares the American public to accept further military action against Iran in retaliation for any attacks that occur, perpetuating the cycle of violence that serves military and ideological interests while endangering ordinary people on all sides of the conflict. The reference to sleeper cells and global terror networks that Iran has been running for almost 5 decades represents a particular form of threat inflation that deserves critical examination. The existence of Iranian intelligence networks abroad is undisputed, as is the existence of American and Israeli intelligence networks around the world. Every major nation maintains such capabilities. The characterization of Iranian networks specifically as terror networks, while American and Israeli networks are characterized as intelligence or security services, reflects the double standard that pervades all discussion of this conflict. When the United States maintains capabilities to act abroad, it is national security. When Iran maintains similar capabilities, it is terrorism. The same actions are characterized completely differently based on which nation performs them. The economic dimensions of this conflict receive insufficient attention in media coverage focused on military action and security threats. The oil markets are responding to the uncertainty that American aggression has created. Global supply chains that depend on stability in the Persian Gulf region are threatened by the conflict that American policy has initiated. Inflation that affects ordinary Americans and Europeans and people worldwide will be exacerbated by the energy price increases that result from this war. The economic costs of American aggression will be paid not by the policymakers who chose it, but by ordinary people in every country affected by global economic integration. This is a war that affects everyone, not merely the citizens of the nations directly involved. The assertion that Iran poses an existential threat to Israel that justifies unlimited military action ignores the actual balance of capabilities between the nations. Israel possesses nuclear weapons. Iran does not. Israel possesses one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world. Iran possesses a military that, while capable of defensive operations, cannot match Israeli capabilities in conventional terms. Israel enjoys unlimited military support from the United States, the most powerful nation in world history. Iran is subject to comprehensive sanctions designed to prevent it from developing advanced capabilities. The idea that Iran represents an existential threat to Israel reverses the actual relationship of capabilities. Israel can destroy Iran. Iran cannot destroy Israel. The threat framing is designed to justify Israeli aggression, not to accurately describe the strategic situation. The mourning that is occurring across Iran and among Shia communities worldwide for Ayatollah Khamenei represents a religious and cultural dimension that American policymakers seem not to have considered or not to have valued. Khamenei was not merely a political leader. He was a religious authority whose guidance was followed by millions of believers. His assassination will be remembered not merely as a political event, but as an attack on Shia Islam by its enemies. The religious response to this assassination will extend far beyond any immediate military retaliation, shaping the consciousness of communities for generations. Americans who think of this conflict in purely political or military terms miss entirely the religious significance that will determine how it is remembered and what its long-term consequences will be. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand that the threat Americans are being told to fear is the direct consequence of American aggression, not Iranian evil. I'm Michael Harris. Today we witness the ultimate expression of imperial hypocrisy, the demand that victims accept their victimization without response, while aggressors threaten unlimited violence against any resistance. Iran will respond because nations always respond when attacked. The only question is whether Americans understand that the threats they face at home are created by the policies their government pursues abroad. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and understand that peace cannot be achieved by threatening unlimited war. I'll see you in the next video.